but I'm not here speaking as a teacher tonight. I am speaking as one very irate parent and citizen of the state of New York, and pretty much a citizen of the United States of America, and for my community, which I live in Oswego, New York. So one of the first things I want to talk about is how we got here. And Michelle touched on some of it. But I just came into some information a week or two ago. It shocked me just when you think you hear it all, right? You hear something else and you're like, what? 6 years ago, I think 2000, well, Board of Education, this was when our Raise to the Top first came into the state. And Board of Education were allowed to give a yes or no vote. And it was like, yes, you can accept Raise to the Top money, and then you buy in and do all the Common Core and everything that comes along with it. If you vote no, the Board of Education stopped, well, we'll vote no, and we like the way things are, and we'll go on our merry way. Well, then I just happened to be in town, down toward Ithaca, in a place called Trumansburg, and I met a BOE president. We ended up having breakfast together. When those Board of Eds that chose to vote no, when that got back to New York State Education Department, they got a call from the Commissioner of Education. And they were told, you might want to reconsider that no vote and vote yes. Because if you vote no, you're not only not going to get the money, you're going to be forced to do it anyway. And that is not secondhand. I got that from the horse's mouth, and my jaw about hit the table. Because I didn't think that's the way democracy and voting worked here. Now I want to talk about Governor Cuomo. Anybody wants to applaud for him? No. All right, we talked about the gap elimination. One of his biggest campaign promises the first time he ran was to get rid of gap elimination. What gap elimination did is it allowed New York State to balance its budget. But what it did was it balanced the budget at the total expense of education. He also put on a tax cap, and a tax cap sounded like a great idea. And along with that tax cap, there was supposed to be mandate relief and it would ease the pain. Well, not only have we not had any tax cap or mandate relief, the state has piled on additional mandates, underfunded some of the ones that were currently existing, and the new ones weren't funded at all. Then he brought us into the Common Core, and he took the Race to the Top money and just took it sight unseen, as was said earlier. Lately, he's got this nice spiffy commercial out there saying, geez, this is the greatest pro-teacher budget, education budget, and this is the most we put into education in my term. Now, he's not lying. But what he's done over the first term was he took $20 away from us, gave us back $5, and expects us all to be like, oh, great, this is all great. Unfortunately, he's underestimated because people now have caught on. The money he put back into education, we're at pre-2008 education funding right now. With all what he's touting is this great influx of cash to education. We are at pre-2008 funding for public education right now. His agenda all along has clearly fostered the destruction of public education in favor of privatization. And we can talk more on that after if you wish. I'm going to, pardon the expression, go off script a little bit here because of something Michelle just said. You know, 2 years ago, I would have never pictured myself speaking in front of 5 people, let alone 40 or 50. 2 months ago, I would have never anticipated speaking in front of people like this. This is the second time now in a week, and you're a bigger group than I had before. But also, I never thought I would write a 16-page document that tells you why the score does not work and their formula is worth about this much. And I can prove it to you. I also never thought I'd be writing a 14-page document on where Governor Cuomo gets his money from. And it's all here. And if you take the time, it's disgusting what he has sold our children out to. Now, why has the truth been so hard to get? I don't know, is there any administrator in this room? Because if there is, I'm here I'll protect you. No, I will, because people don't understand. Every BOCES superintendent in New York State is a deputy commissioner of New York State. half of their salary comes directly from Albany and the New York State Education Department. They are Albany's long arm that reaches in to our counties and our districts. So they get told by NYS, do this, and they tell everybody to do this, or else. And it's pretty intimidating. So what do? They turn around and they tell all the district superintendents, you do this, or else. And they might threaten certification. They might threaten to revoke licenses. But it's all about threats. And you're threatening people who have their own homes, their own kids, their own dreams. They're not any different than us. They just happen to be in the first part of the hill as it starts to roll down. They put pressure on local superintendents, administrators. Administrators gag their teachers, and I'm not making that up. Teachers are afraid to speak. Administrators are afraid to speak. Boards of ed are afraid to speak. Doesn't that say something in and of itself? We're now being ruled by fear. If this was such a great thing, why the fear? Why the intimidation? No one wants to live like that. But that's what they're doing. And the threat, what is the threat? Our money. Well, gee, what are you gonna do? We don't have much more for you to take. So it all filters down to the communities in the form of misinformation, partial truths, half-truths, and it bothers me. Most of the teachers are silent because they've been threatened. They themselves have not been given the entire picture. So I'm here to speak about the parental rights that all you have as parents and guardians regarding the New York State tests. It's really simple. Every parent in New York State has the right to refuse these tests for their child. I'll say it again. Every parent in New York State has the right to refuse these tests. So I want to make sure you heard me. On the count of 3, I'd like you to say the word refuse. 1, 2, 3. Refuse. Okay, I'm going to step away from the mic. There's 40 of you out here. I shouldn't be louder. Refuse. Refuse. You know, that looked pretty good on my APPR, wouldn't I? I got all that fast participation. But I'm not here as a teacher. I'm not going to lie. When you walk out of here and go back to your communities, I hope you get as many children to refuse this test as you want and as you can. Your district's not going to lose money. To date, no district in New York State has lost money. Some people have been told they've lost money by assistant superintendents, and they didn't lose money. You might be expected to reallocate money in the anticipation that there might be some AIS or lab or resource services that might have to be provided. No district in the state, to the best of my knowledge, has lost any money. The growth formula used to determine that student growth is seriously flawed and not acceptable as reliable. This is a growth formula that in turn impacts your teachers, your kids, your schools, which means it ultimately affects your community. In fact, I'm going to tell you right now, it's better for your child to be scored a refusal code 999 and not take the test at all, because that cannot harm your teacher. It can't. And unfortunately, a lot of teachers aren't aware of this. A 999 refusal cannot harm your teacher. However, any child that takes this test, regardless of their ability level, could be the highest kid in the class. That child could have a negative impact on your teachers and your schools, because the formula is a crapshoot. There was a court case, I found out, I have an update for it. There was a court case in New York. They had a teacher that was highly effective, one of the best of the best. 1 year later, she was ineffective. Took it to court. I was happened to be at a meeting about 10 days ago, and right now that court case is stalled. It's stalled by New York State because, gee, they can't figure out why the formula doesn't work. Now what they did was they allowed this teacher to use another part of the APPR process that rates teachers. They allowed her to double up on, I think, her local score or some other score, and now she's back to being an effective teacher. So why isn't New York State publicizing this? because it's an admission publicly that the score they're trying to bamboozle the public with is wrong and inaccurate. And I'm not sure if the public is aware of this either, because I'm probably pretty sure you haven't been told. If you've been told, tell me what district has told you the truth, and I'll write them a thank you note. If a child sits for 1 day of the test, of a 3-day test, the district gets full credit for that child, regardless of score. All they care about, they want that body in that seat, because there's that magical 95% number that I'll address in a few moments. How many of you heard the 95% AYP? Has anyone heard of that? We want to get all 95% of our kids need to be seated for this test. 1 day out of 3. Kid doesn't even have to answer a question. But the district gets credit in the government's eyes for administering that test, and it counts. The problem is that 1 day also counts against your child's teacher. They do not prorate it. That 1 day kills the teacher. It adds already bad data into a bad formula. It's a mess. Think about that. And it's okay if you don't get that 95% AYP that they're throwing out there as a threat. You can go 1 year, 2, 3. It's all right. I've had people talk about, oh, we're a focus school. Well, we want to get off the focus list. What happens if we don't get off the focus list? If you don't get off the focus list, it's the same time as before. You got to write a plan. It's a pain. You write a plan, and you might go visit Albany 3 times during the school year and say, this is what we're doing to try to get off your list. Nobody loses their job. Nobody loses money. They give you more hoops to jump through. And then they make you wait as long as they can before they tell you if you're off the focus list. This is going on in my school district right now of Oswego, New York. So even if every child in the state took the test with a valid formula, 50% would be set up as failures. And that's the best case scenario. That's if a formula worked. Now, fortunately, as of last week, 2 New York State regents came out and spoke very publicly about their dismay in the tests themselves. You guys have been very patient. I won't read the whole thing to you, but I am going to hit the highlights of it. This is Dr. Kathleen Cashin, one of the New York State Board of Regents members. She came out very publicly and said, as a regent of the state of New York, I cannot endorse the use of the current state tests for teacher and principal evaluation, since that was not the purpose for which they were developed. You know, call me crazy. My brother always says college-educated people don't have common sense. But even the common sense side of me said, if you're going to give a test, you probably should read the results for what the test was actually designed for. And that's not what's happening. The American Statistical Association, the National Academy of Education, the American Educational Research Association, they have all cautioned that student tests should not be used to evaluate individual teachers, nor should these tests be used for student growth measures until there's evidence that they're valid and reliable. Now, any one of us can find this stuff on the internet. So obviously, either Mr. Cuomo really doesn't want what's best for our kids, or he's got to fire some of the people giving him information. Maybe he should call some of us in this room. The other thing she went on to say was, how can we criticize people for opting out when these tests haven't even been verified? We need to cease and desist in the use of these tests until such time as we can be confident in their reliability and validity. And only then, if the tests do meet those criteria, they must be released to teachers and to the public after they're given in the spirit of transparency and accountability. And Regent Cashin's statement was supported also by Regent Betty Ross. But even way back in 2011, when all this started, there was a Regent, Roger Tillis. 2011, he said that our present state tests and the way that they're scaled are not designed to measure growth from year to year. We're years away from actually having in place valid state tests designed to measure growth. At some point, pushback is necessary, and for him, he said the time was now. More recently, September of 2014, beginning of this school year, Tillis addressed the fact again in an op-ed piece in Newsday, came out and said some of these students are being just set up to fail. So what I would like you to ask your Board of Education, if you go back to them, your administration, tell them, be honest with you. Tell them, you do have the right to refuse. And if they tell you you don't, they're lying. Tell them you'd like to be treated with respect, and more importantly, you want your child to be treated with respect. There's a lot of us out here, we don't want to hear about you feeling uncomfortable, we want you feeling pressured, we don't want you feeling harassed, we don't want you feeling intimidated, we don't want you being lied to. We want you treated with respect, the way you should be. As a taxpayer in your community, a parent in your community, a member of your community. Matter of fact, I think if you do that, the response from your administrator should be, I will respect your refusal, and not only that, I thank you for being involved in your child's education in these difficult times. Now, I doubt that's going to happen, but boy, if it does, please post it somewhere. More importantly, I don't want children to feel pressure to take a test once the parents have stated your wishes very clearly. To me, to ask a child to verbally refuse that test, which some districts are trying to do, and there's a lot of pushback. To me, I think that would be morally and ethically wrong, in my opinion, as a parent, an advocate, and a member of my community. I don't think that should be done to our kids when you have explicitly stated your wishes. Honesty and respect. Now, I will say this. That's two ways. You have to respect the parents who choose to take the test. For one reason or another, respect goes both ways. You may disagree with them. There's an old quote, there's a history teacher on the audience, maybe you can tell me who said the quote. I may not agree with what you have to say, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. And we don't have to agree. But if you're a parent and you have those people in your community, if they're going to take the test, I would ask that they sit for all 3 days and do their absolute utmost best, as I would hope those kids would do on any assignment. You know, I have to respect those wishes too. Otherwise, how can my opinion be heard? And the other thing I would say is if you're refusing, don't be afraid to share with your child why you're doing it. Don't be. It's an important lesson. And you are your child's most important teacher. And I think the lesson that they're learning from you is a little bit more important than anything tested on a math and an ELA test. We have all been placed in a situation should never have come about. We were placed in a situation by a governor who, quite honestly, has made no secret of his agenda against public education. We've been put in a situation by a legislature that allowed themselves to hold a rushed vote on a budget after only 3 hours of having the governor's plan in front of them. There's not enough paper in this room. I had my other presentation. A stack of paper sat in front of the legislators was this big. Governor Cuomo, the last night of the budget, put it in front of them and said this is being delivered with a message of necessity. What that means is it's an emergency. That is only supposed to be invoked in a state of emergency. Now, I think most of us in this room are old enough to remember a few late budgets in New York State before, right? I think we survived it. The legislatures, though, they bought into it. All they had to say was, you know what? We're not going to hold this vote because you only gave us 3 hours to look at this thing. So if the budget's late, it's on you, Andrew. But they didn't. And I know for a fact, out of all the senators and assembly people I called, and I called a lot of them, and I did a little informal survey. I asked how many people were calling in over the last 2 weeks before the budget. We're really saying yes, they're in favor of it. I was greeted with no one, not many at all. Sometimes they laughed. The local legislators, the assembly people who are supposed to represent us, received thousands of faxes, emails, phone calls, and letters that if I was a betting man, I'd say, let's use 95%. 95% of them said don't vote for Cuomo's budget. Our voice was ignored. And none of it really cuts the mustard with me. Even as we speak right now, Mr. Cuomo is planning a fundraiser as a proponent of charter schools with Campbell Brown. Campbell Brown, who's currently suing New York State education, by the way, in some of its policy, is rubbing elbow to elbow with Mr. Cuomo. He's the keynote speaker for charter schools. Campbell Brown's husband is also a big charter money guy. Campbell Brown herself, in her position on the board of a charter or two, makes over $400,000 a year. which I believe is taxpayer money funding these charter schools right now. All those kiddies going in these big rallies I see posted on Facebook, charter school, who going to do good on the test rallies. They bust them into Albany to have a pro-charter movement. They took their kids out of school, put them all in nice little t-shirts, great little hats, bust them into Albany for a pro-charter movement on a taxpayer dime. I would love if all of our public schools were allowed to go to Albany, but I don't think we have that freedom. He's essentially being the keynote speaker for the people who dumped millions and millions of dollars into his campaign coffers and into the legislature itself for sole control of education. And I have all the information up here to back that statement up. I'll add one more to it, number-wise. In 2014, 12 millionaires in New York State dumped $10 million into the legislative process to gain control of education. In a 10-week period, 6 million of that was pumped in fast and furious to pass Cuomo's budget and his education reforms. Nothing personal, but looking around the room, I don't think one of those 12 people was us. You have an opportunity. Come together as a community, as parents, grandparents, guardians, your board of ed, they're missing the boat. This is a chance for us to come together, the administration to come together. I wait for the day where in this area more people like William Calla and Joe Rella, two superintendents from the area who are just insanely out in front of this thing and have been forever. There's another principal named Tim Farley in the Ichabod Crane School District. Fantastic. I look up to these people. I admire these people. We need more of those administrators. And locally, some of that is starting to happen. We must not let our schools be taken from us. It was easy to lead. When education was flush with money, it was easy to be a leader. And now we've been sucked dry. We've been beaten down. We've been berated. It's not easy to lead when things go sour. But right now is when our leadership, everyone in this room, is needed the most. One last thing I would like to do, because you were so good earlier, let's do a little practice here. Say I refuse for me again. 1, 2, 3.
I refuse.
A little more unison. 1, 2, 3.
I refuse.
Okay, now we're going to change I refuse. Look around. You are not alone. No, seriously, look around. You're not sitting in this room alone. Now change that I to we refuse. 1, 2, 3.
We refuse.
So I'm going to ask a couple questions here, and I want some nice, loud, and proud. We refuse. What is our answer to those in Albany who want to take our schools from us?
We refuse.
What is our answer to those who want testing and bad data to be used against us?
We refuse.
What is our answer to those in Albany and the New York State Department of Education who right now are trying to exploit our children?
We refuse.
Will we be bullied by Governor Cuomo?
No.
We refuse. Now, nice and loud. They're a very small group, but I think there's a couple people in here, they got some lung power. On the count of 3, I want this mall to hear us. We refuse. 1, 2, 3.
We refuse.
Thank you very much.